And I love fishing. I can't say it enough. I'm never giving it up. I just love it so much. I love fishing. Man, I love fishing. That's just what I do. I can't say it enough. I'm never giving it up. I just love it so much. I love fishing. Man, I love fishing. That's just what I do. See, everything about fishing is great. The word hate don't even correlate with dropping bait. I can't wait to get my bucket list of fish caught and kissed, then released into a watery mist. I'm in bliss when the big fish is landed. It feels outstanding. The sounds and sights of being outside standing under the stars, no cars or traffic lights. The sound a wave makes when it breaks makes for magic nights. I've been in nasty fights with hard hitters, and I'm ready for whenever that alligator guard or shark visits. I'm a shark wizard. I catch the biggest and the baddest, release the beast, watch them disappear like magic. I gotta have it, a reeling them up. I gotta have it, the feeling is love. A real is a must have with mustard. I just ask for what I need. It's likely a circle hook, and look, it ain't size 3. I can't say it enough. I'm never giving it up.
From deep in the heart of Central Texas, it's the Best of the Outdoors podcast. Brought to you by Texas Fish and Game Magazine, the voice of the Texas outdoor nation. I'm your humble host, Dustin Von Warnke, the Outdoor Success Guy, back with another podcast for you. So excited to be able to sit down in front of this microphone and this computer screen to talk to you guys again about the outdoors in Texas and beyond. This is just an awesome opportunity I get. This is therapeutic for me to be able to talk into this microphone and share my thoughts in the outdoors, and also share the blessings of the outdoors with you guys that God has bestowed upon us in Texas and beyond, and just the diverse wildlife and landscape and fish that we have, and aquatic creatures, and all kinds of awesome stuff that's out there. Just so much to take in, and I'm going to do this podcast just as long as I can keep going, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. Today I've got Chester Moore, our editor-in-chief, on the podcast, and we're talking about the Early Flounder Run. Before I get to that, some fishing stories for you. Went to Lake Conroe last weekend, right before I release this podcast. It's a week before the podcast releases when I'm recording this, and basically went fishing with my father-in-law, Joe Vogel, a great guy. Big shout out to him. He does a lot of work with one of the ministries I work with, Camp Agape, which is a bereavement camp for kids, kind of a camp that helps kids over the loss of a loved one. And he was the president for many years. Couldn't go on this trip with me for a number of years, and I finally got him on the trip. We had a great time out on the boat in the water with two guys that are new to our ministry, and kind of teaching them how we do jug fishing, and caught a lot of fish. Not as many as we normally catch because the weather was incredibly warm, and there was a cold front that came through. It kind of made everything, really chilly, and the fish just weren't where they normally are on this one point that we always discover every time we're out there, and the fish just weren't in that area. We didn't catch very many, but our whole boats cumulatively caught a lot of fish, and I was in charge of the fish cleaning on Saturday afternoon and had a lot of fun, and my father-in-law was ribbing those fish after we were cutting those fillets off, and as Dennis Martin, who's been on the podcast before, calls it, the fish disassembly line. And it was just a lot of fun getting out there and fishing. Caught one of our boats caught a 40 plus pounder, and one of our other boats caught a 20 plus pounder. So not that many huge floor fish, as we call them, because they only fit on the floor. They don't fit in the live well, but still a good time. Just great to get out and fellowship with other Christian men, and just great time to spend outdoors with your family. I mean, this is just a wonderful time of year. Heck, any time is a good time of year. Even if you're ice fishing up in Michigan, it's a good time of year to be outdoors. All right, so there you go. But no matter where you are, listening to this in the world, I know a lot of you guys listen from all over the place. Just thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching and reading and listening to all of our stuff. I've got a little bit of a cold this week, or allergies. I don't know what exactly it is, so forgive my little sniffling on the podcast this week on the recording that I do with Chester. But I love doing this podcast for you guys, and this is just as therapeutic for me as it is for you guys, and I just want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for listening. Please tell a friend, please subscribe, smash the subscribe button wherever you are listening, even if it's on YouTube. Also, please subscribe on iTunes and leave us a 5-star 5-star rating review. That would help other people find the podcast and be able to engage with us in a deeper way. And we get a new show every 2 weeks when you subscribe. So that's a good way to do that on your mobile device or your phone or whatever you listen to this on, your computer. You can basically subscribe through Podbean. That's the app that this podcast is hosted through. It's a hosting service for podcasts. And I haven't mentioned this in a long time, have an online course if you want to do the kind of media stuff like I do in the outdoor industry with a podcast or writing articles or anything like that. Doing videos on YouTube and those kind of things like I do. You can definitely check out that online course at I believe it's just outdoorsuccessguy.com. That'll bring you to the landing page for the course, and it'll kind of teach you how to do that kind of stuff, and it's at a really low price right now too. So yeah, it's outdoorsuccessguy.com, not the outdoorsuccessguy.com, just outdoorsuccessguy.com. And that'll bring you to my Thinkific site where I host the course, and you can purchase the course. It's relatively inexpensive for all the values you get, and it's me teaching how I do stuff in the outdoors. So you can go check that out at outdoorsuccessguy.com. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening. Here's my interview with Mr. Chester Moore. Here we go. Joining me on the phone, Mr. Chester Moore, editor-in-chief, Texas Fish & Game Magazine, host of his own radio show. How are you doing today, Chester?
Man, I'm doing great. My daughter Faith, who's sitting right here with me, she and I were just calling in some turkeys that are in a huge farm down the road from the house. And these turkeys run around the woods. They get all over the floor, kind of feral turkeys.
Feral turkeys. I love it.
I mean, think about a feral hog, that they're literally hogging it out. Well, these are feral turkeys. And it's warm enough now. They're already kind of getting the itch. And she was using some of her high-tech gobbling skills. We'll post on Instagram later. Gobble, you heard it. Gobble, gobble, gobble. One more time. There we go. That literally got them from like 100 yards away up to us. So it was, and we were photographing some wild Canada geese this morning and some mallards down close to the bayou where I live. So it's been a good morning. And you're calling in to talk about early flounder, and we're kind of just past where it started,
right? And
kind of going what I'm calling the peak of the early flounder run. Now people are going right now. It's going, Chester, how can there be a peak when there isn't an early flounder run? Well, you just haven't been exposed to the fact that the run of the flounder people talk about in the fall is the migration into the Gulf of Mexico. So flounder are in the bays, marshes, even up in the river systems. The bulk of them migrate out in the fall to spawn in the Gulf of Mexico, but they got to return, right? And they start returning typically around the middle of March, but there's an early run of fish that I have found some of the bigger fish come in early, and that starts around Valentine's Day and basically runs for what I call about a month, basically till around the 15th or so of March, and then we kind of get that steady run of flounder. So let me break down the difference in what an early run would be. An early run is characterized by small flurries of bites.
Okay.
You're not going to go into an area and just start whacking them like you would in the full-on spring run, or definitely not the fall run. But what you'll find is pockets of fish that'll move in on the big incoming tides, and you'll get flurries of fish, and you might run a shoreline and get nothing. The next shoreline, you get a limit. But there are fish moving in on the incoming tides right now along the Gulf Coast.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's great, man, and a lot of people don't go after them. And we also have holdover fish. Not all of the fish go out in the fall, and with the increased numbers, because of the conservation measures that were put in place going on 11 years ago now, you have a lot more fish holding over. So you got holdover fish on top of new fish,
right,
that are here. And what I like about the new fish and why runs are so crucial is a flounder isn't exactly the ultimate long-distance swimmer. They're not a pelagic fish. They're not like a marlin or a mako shark. They move small distances. So when they come in or go out, they're a lot hungrier because of the caloric usage. So when these new fish come in, they're ready to bite. When you find a pocket of them, you usually nail them.
Usually just come home with some flounder, huh? Wow.
Yep, that's it.
I'm sorry to ask this. I'm not a huge flounder expert like you are, but how do flounders swim? I mean, do they swim? Do they just kind of swim vertically or horizontally, or how does that work?
They swim just like you see them, pretty much.
Like flat, right?
Yeah, man. They swim like that, and they're actually good swimmers. But what I've seen flounder swimming in clear water in the wild, and what they typically do is they'll swim a short distance and then they'll just kind of lay down a second, then swim a little more, you know. But
That's what I figured.
yeah, but they also can, you get a really strong current that'll help push them along, and that's why the outgoing tides are so wonderful for catching fish in the fall, because they're wanting to leave. They have the urge to leave, and the incoming are really, really good, even better than normal. They are my favorite incoming tide, but they're even better in the early and the spring runs.
Okay, cool. No, that's good. Obviously, yeah. I mean, that's when you always talk about, some of the best flounder fishing being is later on in the spring. But it's just interesting that you chose this topic for me for the editorial calendar for this, because I had never really heard of flounder being that active this early in the year.
Well, it's really interesting. I guess my flounder mentor is Captain Skip James, and Skip's been retired for about a decade now, and has had some health issues. But Skip knows more about flounder in terms of what they're doing. Anybody ever met my wife? And he said, he took me out one February and we caught some flounder, and I knew there were some holdover fish.
Right.
But we started noticing. I'd say this is probably 96, 97, very early into my career, that there were just some huge fish being caught, and it would always happen starting around Valentine's Day on, and it would always be in conjunction with big tidal movements, bigger incoming tides. And I'm like, and right now we have a full moon as we're recording this, and that usually helps matters as well.
Sure.
And fish coming in. Migrations don't all take place at once. This is the first push of the migration. And people have basically looked at flounder as like they're a big dumb fish you catch in the fall. But with Flounder Revolution and all the things I've done over the years, my book Flounder Fever, I've been able to prove that flounder are a fish that have a lot of different dynamics. And they are just like a largemouth bass. As a matter of fact, they used to call them the largemouth of the days. So you have a pre-spawn, a post-spawn. You got a pre-run, an early run, a middle run, and a late run.
Interesting. And is it better to fish day or night for flounder? I've always wondered that.
Definitely daytime. The only time I've ever caught flounder at night are around piers with lights. Flounder are very visual, and it's pretty much a daytime thing. Matter of fact, I don't even like real early light. I like to have about at least 30 minutes of light out there, whereas speckled trout, I'll be out there before the light comes.
I see. And the other thing I was going to ask you is, because the reason I ask about that, don't people gig for flounder at night, right?
Yeah, they gig for flounder because the lights allow them to penetrate into the water, and the flounder are bedded up, and they stick them at a gig.
That's right. All right, I got that now. Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious. So
yeah, that ain't rocket science, but we can make the other stuff rocket science.
Well, I mean, the fishing for them is a lot more of a challenge than just going and sticking them with.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with somebody going out and gigging some flounder, but it's pretty much you shine a light, stick them. This has got a lot to it, and that's what really is always intriguing me. What I'm excited about is the digital edition of Texas Fish and Game has an exclusive. You're not going to find it anywhere else. Not going to find it on my Facebook, anywhere. A Flounder Revolution column in every single issue. Flounder Revolution took a 5-year hiatus.
Yes, sir.
And it was time to bring it back, and there's a lot more coming with this. But the column and this podcast are kind of a reveal of a lot more stuff that's going to be going on with Flounder this year. And one of the things we always were talking about is the fact that there's so many facets of flounder fishing. I actually wrote, it's interesting because you're intrigued by, because you're not a flounder fisherman. You live up in the hill country, and you're more geared to stream fishing and lakes. And things like that. Is the fact that I wrote an article on this for Tide Magazine, CCA's magazine. I would say Early Flounder Run, probably 01, 02, and literally had people email and say, "You're crazy. It's not real," But I would say those are probably the same people that wrote in 05 and said that when I wrote the article for Tide called Jaws in the Gulf, that there were no great whites in the Gulf, and that has been completely validated by science. But people are kind of catching on to the fact that, hey, man, there's some flounder out there early.
No, that's good. I mean, I think I'm just intrigued because it's such an interesting fish, and I just, for instance, give us what the best, before we get too much further in this, what's the best, bait for flounder? Because you've given a couple of tips like that before on this show.
Oh, we're gonna go full on. We're gonna hammer. I can't do flounder 10% or 90%
I
or
know.
99%.
It's full throttle, man.
Matter of fact, 100% kind of sucks.
110's better. Yeah.
No, that sucks. We're gonna go 150.
150. Okay, that's cool. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
But it's really intriguing stuff. And so let me just break down kind of what to do, what we're using out there this time of year.
Yes.
And I tell you what's interesting is, like I said, the number one thing I'm looking for is a tidal movement. What I tell people, and I may be the only guy that says this constantly, is, look, people, you go fishing when you can go fishing. I can tell you the optimal time, but then if you're working a shift, you got family stuff, you go fishing when you go fishing.
Yes.
But the number one thing you look for is tidal movement. So if you're going flounder fishing in the spring or any time, I prefer an incoming tide even in the fall, other than when a northern first kind of blows through and does its thing. But I'm looking for an incoming tide to be the optimal fishing. Any tidal movement will have fish biting. Actually, any water current can turn it on. I've had slack tides come in and completely shut off flounder fishing numerous times. I'm talking about like the tide will come in and it'll shut it down to such an extent that there's no bites. Then a ship will come by and pull water, and you'll have about a 5-minute window of bites.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yep, it's true. I've seen it, and I saw this proven at Texas Freshwater, at Sea Center, Texas, in Lake Jackson, because I had written about this, and one of the milers said, "Watch this, Chester." And we were taking pictures of flounder in the tanks, trying to get pictures of them feeding, and they had turned the current off. The pumps, the current makes current, so I could get pictures because there were too many bubbles.
Right.
And one fish came up out of a tank full of 100 flounder to eat, and I'm like, "This is ridiculous. Watch this." And he turned the current on, and about 30 seconds later, there was a feeding frenzy.
That's great biology, right?
I've been in areas several times where I remember forgetting my dad having a great flounder day, and it would just bang, completely off.
Wow.
And then a few minutes later, here comes a ship, and the ship pulled water, and I think we caught 2 or 3 fish. So water movement, incoming tide, the best. You're going to want to look right now. The early part, you're going to fish around the passes. You got a chance to fish around any of the inlets and from the Gulf. I like to fish spots where you have shallow water, meaning deep water, and you have shallow water. I prefer mud bottom or sand bottom. I avoid shell right now, not so much. It'll be a little bit later in the spring. We'll do that, and then I'll go into the southern tier of the base system to look for bayous and inlets feeding into the base system and fish the outer shoreline and about the first 50 yards of the cut. And what I like to do this time of year is I start off a little bit smaller bait than I would, or lure than I would other times of the year. I will fish starting off with. Usually I use like heavy braid, and I always have a line with at least 30-pound Berkeley fire line rigged with like a smoke-colored gulp curl tail, which is I think swimming mullet, or a Mr. Twister in kind of the smokish color or the pink, a little bitty tiny piece of shrimp, or that's kind of my big stick if they're biting. But if I think I'm going to make them bite, I go completely the opposite, which is fluorocarbon line, about 10-pound fluorocarbon, and a little sassy shad from Mr. Twister, kind of like it's a shad color with metal flake.
Yep.
And a tiny piece of shrimp or gulp on it, and I just hop it along the bottom and wait for fish to hit. And what happens is this time of year, your bait fish sources are a lot smaller. In other words, the shad aren't as big. The bigger shad are already migrated out in the Gulf. The shrimp are smaller. They're typically on smaller stuff. So I start with a little bit smaller bait. I might use the 2-inch and then go up to the 3.5, 4-inch, something like that. The bite's really on.
So you've talked about this before, where you're using a little small piece of shrimp on the tip of the hook, correct?
Yes.
Aside from your artificial lure, that does not mess with the bite hookup in any way, though.
Nah. I always leave the hook exposed.
Okay, always leave the hook exposed. So cover the hook, but leave part of the hook exposed.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I get it.
And I've had guys say like, "You're not really catching them on the lure. You are It's the shrimp.
Right.
First off, that's foolishness. Who cares? I'm catching a
Smarty
fish.
pants. Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's always that guy out there. Well, you can't do it. I had a guy one time, tell me, he goes, I bet I can outfish you fishing flounder in the grass. Because I like to roll through that grass you don't fish with. And I'm like, well, that's fine because I'd rather have a brick dropped on my head than fish through the grass. So there we go. You win. If that's your thing, working through the grass and fishing like you bass and catching flounder, rock roll, have a good time at it.
Right.
My thing. This is a method. What I'm talking about is anyone can apply this.
Yes.
It works.
It's
works
practical
for anybody.
and tactical.
Yeah, it's practical, man. That's the whole thing.
Right.
And we're gonna, we can get in some, maybe later in spring or this summer about some really drastic, crazy techniques.
Right.
But once again, I try to design them so anybody can do the stuff.
Yeah. No,
I hate it when a guy does an illustration of something that's for the masses. They're like, flounders are bass strategies for everybody. You have to have like a slide rule and like a surveying equipment to make all the technique work.
Yeah. You got to hold your mouth the right way, right?
And you got to like kick your leg out a certain direction and face the west wind. And, they're like, if you do this, you will catch fish. And I'm like, man, who can do that?
Oh, my God.
I want everybody to catch fish. But one of the other key thing with the flounder is, when you're fishing, I'll hop small little hops along the bottom. And then if that doesn't work, I'll just reel it in and drag it. And I fish spinning equipment. Spinning equipment has a lower gear ratio.
Right.
And I like because it naturally makes me fish slower. Also, there's a lot less backlashes. And if you like to skip a lure, if you can skip, spinning equipment's the best for skipping. And I could skip that lure under, Roseau and docks and different things like that. So spinning equipment works out a whole lot better than the casting stuff. And, all the bass fishermen, when they do finesse fishing, smaller stuff, they use spinning gear. And it works. It's, Skip taught me a little bit of this years ago, and I just really ran with it, He wasn't into finesse stuff at all. He was all power fishing. And I'm like, man, there's a way to get these fish when they don't want to bite, and that's kind of what we're talking about. But this spring thing is great. And right now, I mean, I'm out here. I'm out here right in Orange, close to the Texas coast. I mean, I'm literally 6 miles away from Sabine Lake as a eagle flies. And, it's probably 60 degrees, but when you have those days that warm up into the 70s,
right?
If you find a warm afternoon, those fish will be up a little higher, a little shallower on those muddy bottoms. The mud bottoms, if it's sunny in particular, the mud bottoms retain heat better than the rest of the bottoms because of the black color, the gummy color.
Okay.
And that'll warm up a few degrees, be more bait fish, more fish. That's just some little tips and strategies you can try.
No, it's good. And I mean, I'm always curious because of flatfish being what they are, how to strategize. And you're giving great tips because this is the kind of stuff I love about this podcast is that we give listeners, good stuff to take home. But I mean, this is stuff that like you said earlier, it's stuff that anybody can apply and catch fish. It's not
that's the ticket. That's why
secret
people need to read the
technique.
Flounder Revolution column in the digital. If you never read the digital issue of Fishing Game, a lot of bonus video content, stuff like that. But read the Flounder Revolution column. It's exclusive every month, and you're going to see new stuff, cutting edge stuff. It's time. It's a thing we accomplished what we originally wanted to accomplish in 5 years, which was to make people look at larger flounder as a fish to be released.
Yes.
We still got a long ways on that, but we started that dialogue. I'm seeing a lot more out there because we gave for 5 years, we gave a replica away every month to the angler who released the biggest fish and turned it in. It was basically share lunker for flounder. I did that for 5 years. It was sponsored by the Fish Mount Company, who does awesome taxidermy work in Florida, and CCA. The second year CCA came on a sponsor. And we gave out, in 5 years, we gave out 45 flounder mounts.
Oh, wow. That's
and one
cool.
Guy got like 20 of them.
You really caught a big
Guy
one.
named Jansen Miller. We had Flounder Angler of the Year out of 5 years. He was Flounder Angler of the Year 3 of those years. And but it got people excited about it. And so we're back. A lot of new stuff coming up this year for Flounder. I had to kind of go underground, for a while with it. And I didn't fish for flounder quite as much because of what other things going on. And but we're back. I've been doing a lot of studying on flounder, and there's a lot of cool stuff coming up in 2019 and beyond with Flounder Revolution, Texas Fishing Game.
That's really cool. And the Texas Gulf Coast is so diverse and it's got so much, to offer there, the third coast, if you will. And, the other thing that I was going to mention to you is back to spinning reels real quick. You had an article, and I forget what issue it was, on why spinning reels are important. And I thought that was a pretty fascinating look at this, the techniques and stuff, and for certain types of fishing, why it's better than bait casters.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do that's it falls truer. In other words, falls straight down to vertical fishing.
Right.
And sometimes that fall is really the key in any kind of fishing.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fall right or over a particular piece of cover or structure, and there's a lot truer fall, I tell people all the time, man, look, if you're fishing and you're not an expert caster, and who is really?
I'm not.
Always have spinning equipment, because it can. And by the way, the worst backlashes in human history are all on spinning reels.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a black bear attack. They almost never happen. When they do, they're carnivorous, and they're kind of like a carnivorous attack. But you have like a 1/100th of a chance of backlashing with a spinning equipment as you do with casting equipment. And of course, I use both. I mainly use the casting stuff when I'm fishing for specs, reds, most bass fishing applications. But I probably haven't caught but maybe 5 or 6 flounder on casting gear in 20 years.
This is kind of off the subject real quick, but my father-in-law, my grandfather, had one of those that Joe Doggett wrote about, the red reel.
The red reel, baby.
The Abu Garcia. I still own my grandfather's.
Oh, that's cool.
He died in 1986, and I still own that. It's one of my favorite reels that I own, because it's just that iconic, classic Abu Garcia look and feel, and oh my gosh, they don't make them like that, like the style anymore. It's just something
they're
iconic
beautiful. They're
about
beautiful.
that.
That was a big deal around our household.
Yeah.
Is that kind of stuff was really a big deal to us. We didn't have a lot of money, so when we did get something like that, it was treasured.
It was
in
a
my
big
household.
deal, yeah, for sure.
And that's the thing we got to kind of do is get back to some of that, treasuring some of these great things, and creating some new memories. And one way you can create new memories is getting in this early flounder run and showing the other people they don't know what they're talking about. There are flounder out there right now, and you can go catch them.
It's kind of like, on the freshwater lake here, Tommy Tidwell, he made a comment on one of the things I was editing, one of his hotspot reports he was editing. He was like, don't be the guy that's waiting on the news of how the run's going. You need to be the guy on the trip, getting the information firsthand. And the way that he was so direct with that, I was just giggling, because I was like, man, this guy's on top of it.
That's true. I'll be honest, I had to write fishing reports for years, earlier in my career, because that's what the publications demanded, like the newspapers and stuff like that. I hated it, because to me it was all false information, because fishing changes about a minute.
Right.
I like to teach people patterns.
Yeah.
What you've heard right now is patterns.
Yes.
I mentioned kinds of locations like Seawolf Park and San Luis Pass and Sabine Pass. Those are kinds of locations. And if you just go on
right,
and go flounder fishing, and I guarantee 85% of the people that fish there probably just go there because it's a known hotspot.
right.
But do they know why? Do they know that it's on a migrational route? Do they know that there's big drop-offs in the deeper water where the flounder go, and there are shallower flats along there? If you know that, we'll go, man, well, Seawolf isn't working. But man, if I drive over to Sabine Pass, it's only an hour and 15 over there. There are spots like that I can get from the bank just like this,
right.
So it might not be good there, but it might be good somewhere else. That's why patterns are important. Bass fishermen, Rick Clunn is a friend of mine. It blows my mind to say that, but the greatest, in my opinion, bass fisherman of all time. And
right.
Rick just won his the oldest guy to ever win a tournament. He already broke that record 3 years ago. He broke it again, Bassmaster Elite. And Rick told me one time, he goes, the problem with young anglers coming up is they're incredible at the technological part and running spots. So get all these spots, but if what they're running the spots for, if the information got the spots for, if the weather changed, the barometric pressure, and changed the way it worked, when people gave it to them, they're useless.
Right. Yeah,
he goes, but you got the young guy. Because however, the young guys that have the instinct of feeling, oh, hold on, it feels like it's 3 or 4 degrees cooler. There's a change in pressure, and they know the spots, the technology. Those guys would be the dangerous ones. At a more basic level, if people can learn, hey, these are good locations, but why do we use these locations? They'll always have a spot to fish. It's productive.
Yeah, that's good. And it's true because it comes down to instinct to some regard. I mean, technology is great, but I've always said on this show and in my writing work that don't use that as a crutch. Use that as to your advantage. Use the basic patterns, use the basic instinct, use the basic knowledge, the common, I mean, the group of knowledge that's out there is just so immense right now, especially with the technology we have in social media and everything now.
Yeah.
Education that we have is better than it's ever been. I mean, don't use technology and rely solely on that, because someday that might not be here. I mean, I'm just saying if something crazy happens, but
exactly, and you lose your soul.
Right. That's where I'm going with that, Chester. Yes, exactly.
You don't have the feel for it, man.
Right.
I'm sitting here right now going, man, if I had the time today, I know where I'd be flounder fishing.
Right.
Just because of the way the conditions are. I'm like, I know where their good spot would be right now. You know.
That's good. And I didn't mean to get off on the red wheel thing, but I mean the whole idea that you and I talk about just about every time we do the show is the essence of why we do what we do in the outdoors. And it's not all about catching, killing, and doing all that, just dominating the wild. It's about that communion with nature and with God and with the reason in our souls while we fish, and hunt and do all the
Exactly,
other
man.
things.
That's really what it's about. I can't separate my fishing from my memories of me with my dad fishing.
Oh, me neither, dude. Totally. And
I can't separate that. And I don't want to.
And on the last show, let's see here, which one was it? Yeah, it was the second to last show. I think it was Jeff Stewart and I. No, I guess it was the last show. Jeff Stewart and I were talking about winter catfish, and my goodness, man, did we share some memories that I hadn't thought about in decades, man. With my grandfather going out fishing with him for catfish, and with my dad going fishing for perch and bass and all that stuff that we did. I mean, that was what it was all about back then. And I mean, just to remember those things is like the essence of why I still fish. I mean,
well, I have had a difficult time enjoying fishing and hunting as much since my dad passed.
Because your dad's gone. Yeah, I know.
I mean, I love the topic. I love all of it, but it really, in the last 2 to 3 months, has it finally started coming back for me.
Sure.
And it's not that I love all this, but it's like me actually going and enjoying the application of doing it. It's been the same. But my friend Josh Sloan is kind of, every time I get around Josh, which isn't a whole lot, but when I'm around Josh, we start talking about all the various turkey slams and he's a bass fisherman and all this stuff. It just gets me kind of keyed up, and
yep.
I'm kind of back where I was now, and it feels better than ever. But that's because those memories are powerful.
It's reigniting your fire in a way, and that's one thing memories help you do, is just realize why you want to go forward, and create new memories with the ones you love. Like you've got Faith, I've got Jackson, we've got our kids and stuff that we can share this all with, and it's a good thing.
I've always been into that, and so I came from that. My dad would take our friends fishing, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like a heritage of that, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons it's so important for me to help other people learn how to do that and become better and more proficient in the field, because my dad didn't have a lot of tools.
Right.
My dad came before the internet era. My dad didn't have a lot of money, but my dad made it work. And because I've been put into a position and I've worked my off to do what I do for 26 years, I want to take whatever opportunities I have and make sure other people out there can go, hey, I can do that too. You know what I mean?
Yes. And that's the whole thing we try to do with the podcast and the digital edition on Flounder Revolution and everything, is make the outdoors more accessible. I talk about that like ad nauseum on this show, but I really drive that home because we're not some super elitist people here trying to talk about the ringtail cat that we're going to hunt, like you like to say, or whatever, But we're
there's always some guy. You know what I mean? There's always.
I'll
give you an example. This would be kind of a great way to wrap this up in terms of how we, a Texas fishing game and all of us the outgrowth of that. 9 years ago, probably, I'm at a Toyota Texas Bass Classic, and I'm doing some coverage for fishgame.com of that tournament, because it was great, man. It's a Texas tournament, it's catch and release, it's really good stuff, right? And there's a bass angler that I'd actually been in the boat with and had on the cover at one point, and he's not a real, like, you could name him. You have to be a really hardcore bass guy to know him. You all right?
Yeah, right.
And I go up there and I say, okay, can you give me an idea? I know you're not going to tell me where you're. So you give me an idea of what kind of pattern you're following. He goes, they're out there in the water somewhere. And he just looked like he was, oh, I'm real cool, Mr. Smug, whatever. I walked off, okay? And then Mike Iaconelli, who I didn't know at the time, I know Mike real well now, comes up. And Mike starts taking a pen and paper and drawing illustrations
Oh my gosh! Wow,
of
he's
where
like
what's going
iconic
on.
bass
And then
angler.
there's a kid, he comes up, he takes the bass he had in his bag and chases the kid around the parking lot with it. Uh,
Typical Mike
and I'm going,
Iaconelli style too,
that's
right?
why he's Mike Iaconelli,
Yeah,
and this guy's who he is.
yeah, and nobody's heard of the other guy. Yeah,
And they won't.
yeah.
You have to be really hardcore. I think he's not a good fisherman. It's just the giving back, all that kind of stuff lives on. That's what I'm excited about being on the Best of the Outdoors podcast. Dustin Warnke, Texas Fishing Game Digital Edition, Flounder Revolution, and all the other crazy projects that Chester Moore engages himself in.
Yeah, no, that's true. And also the one thing that I've been trying to do that you've given me the assignments to do is knock out a monthly video for each issue of the month of 2019.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've been having a lot of fun doing those. I just finished one yesterday for the March issue. So
and there's a wildlife journalist on my column. There's a wildlife journalist,
yes.
10-minute audio track, and your videos, and we got a lot of cool stuff I'm finding out there from different fishing game agencies. We're adding to stories that'll highlight different parts of the feature. So it's a great way to check it out. Awesome stuff, man, and I really appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Yeah,
today.
sure. Yeah, tell people how they can find you, Chester, before we close this out.
Oh, Lord have mercy. How can you find Chester Moore? All right, we'll go to chestermoore.com. That's kind of where I'm doing most of my stuff now. Chestermoore.com. And you can find me on Facebook and at The Chester Moore. That's right, The Chester Moore on Instagram.
Okay, cool. At the Chester Moore. Great. And you've got the Wildlife Journalist is your other website, right?
Yeah, it's my blog, but what I'm doing now is sending everybody to chestermoore.com. You can see all that on there.
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't realize you had
It's kind of a catch-all now.
Catch-all. It's kind of like my DustinsProjects.com. It's the hub of all
it's
things
like,
Dustin.
Just go there, and there's all the stuff.
That's right. That's the way I've been doing it with mine. And I also, DustinWarnke.com, I have too, because you got ChesterMoore.com. So
there you go,
I did that too.
And email me at Chester@ChesterMoore.com.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, easy to remember that too. That's true.
That's it.
So, all right, thanks a lot for joining us, Chester. I appreciate
you, Dustin. Thank you, man.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chester Moore, the wildlife journalist, as he calls himself. Very, very experienced in fishing and hunting, as well as wildlife and encounters with fish and game that is definitely strange or interesting, or things you didn't know about fish or game that fish or animals that live in the Gulf of Mexico and in our lakes and streams and beyond in our land. Just really great guy. If you've not done so already, and I say this every show just about, so I'm sorry if you've heard this before, but if you've not done so already, subscribe to our newsletters. You get the new podcast every week on Thursday's newsletter. You get the new podcast, even if it reruns. I've got bye weeks here since I do them every 2 weeks, but you get the listing of the podcast every week. On the Thursday newsletter, you have Tactical and Practical Tuesday. I think it's just going to be called Practical Tuesday or something like that next. I forget what they're going to rebrand that as. But the Tuesday newsletter, the Wednesday Wildlife Wednesday newsletter with Chester Moore, and the Thursday Texas State of the Outdoor Nation newsletter, which is kind of our big newsletter that combines all the stories from Tuesday and Wednesday, and then has some news stories in it for Thursday. You'll see a lot of my fingerprints around those newsletters because just recently, this past week, when I'm recording this show, I had 3 stories that were in. One on the bonus ring for archery sites, one on why hunting red lights with coyotes, or why hunting with red lights for coyotes, I should say, and then as well as our friends at let's see here, what was the other one? Oh yeah, friends at Yay Cool and Unio. The camp axe and the tactical shovel. So two kind of product reviews that I did in one of what I thought about those products. So anyway, some interesting stuff and some more stuff coming. And I just love contributing to thefishgame.com because I'm more of a digital guy than I am anything. Most of my projects are on digital. If you want to learn more about me and what I do in the outdoors, read some of my articles, listen to some of these podcasts, or download some videos, you can check out dustinsprojects.com. That's dustinsprojects.com, as I mentioned earlier in the show with Chester. Really good stuff there. It's kind of a hub of all things that I do, just like Chester Moore has chestermoore.com. I have dustinwarnke.com, and my last name is spelled Warncke. Love you guys so much for listening. Thank you. Please tell a friend. Please hit the subscribe button. Please also Visit us online at fishgame.com. We have a ton of content there. All the podcasts since I started this thing with Texas Fish and Game in 2016 are there. If you go back to thebestoftheoutdoors.podbean.com, you'll see all the podcasts since we started this bad boy in 2015. Yes, believe it or not. And on the next podcast, I've got an exciting announcement about a promotion that I'm getting at Texas Fish and Game, and I'm going to save that for that show. And you'll get that. Then some exciting stuff coming for Dustin and Texas Fish and Game. Kind of a more amplified role of what I already do with the magazine, and just love this stuff so much. So sorry again, I have a cold or allergies or whatever the heck it is this morning that when I'm recording this, I'm a little stuffed up. But thank you guys so much for watching, reading, and listening. Have an awesome day in the outdoors. We'll see you next time.